11 rules that Stoicism teaches you to build your identity and stop accepting crumbs. There comes a moment in life when the truth becomes impossible to ignore. A moment when you look at the standards you have accepted, the treatment you have tolerated, the habits you have justified, and something inside you whispers that this is not who you were meant to be. It is the moment you realize you have been living on crumbs, not because that is all you deserved, but because at some point you forgot your own worth. This moment is painful, but it is also liberating, because identity is not built in comfort. Identity is born the moment you refuse to remain who you were. Stoicism teaches that your identity is not a destiny handed down to you. It is a structure you build from the inside out. Epictetus said that people are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of things. In other words, your life changes the moment your perspective changes. Your identity changes the moment you stop outsourcing responsibility. And the life you accept begins to match the standards you set within yourself. When you finally see that you have been accepting crumbs, something awakens in you. Something ancient, something strong, something that refuses to settle for a life governed by fear, hesitation, or the approval of others. Have you ever felt the quiet discomfort of knowing you were meant for more? That subtle tension between who you are and who you could become. That feeling is not ambition, it is awareness. It is your inner consciousness calling you back to yourself. Because the truth is that you have always known your worth. You simply learn to silence it. You learn to compromise, to shrink, to adapt, to make yourself smaller for the sake of belonging. Until belonging cost you your identity. Stoicism steps into that moment like a clear, steady voice. It reminds you that you cannot control the world, but you can control your responses. You cannot choose every circumstance, but you can choose the standards you live by. Identity, according to the Stoics, is the mastery of the inner world. It is the ability to regulate your emotions, to protect your focus, to discipline your thoughts, and to choose your values deliberately. When you understand this, you stop accepting crumbs, not because life becomes easier, but because your inner standards become higher. Modern psychology and neuroscience both reinforce this truth. Your brain adapts to the boundaries you set. If you tolerate disrespect, it becomes normal. If you excuse self-neglect, it becomes habitual. If you remain in environments that shrink you, your identity begins to reflect those limitations. But the opposite is just as true. When you raise your standards, your brain rewires. Your mindset shifts. Your emotional patterns evolve. You begin to choose differently. You begin to move differently. You begin to speak differently. You begin to become someone you respect. This is the moment of awakening. The moment you no longer want to survive life, but shape it. The moment you decide that crumbs are no longer acceptable. The moment identity becomes a conscious creation rather than an unconscious reaction. And from this moment forward, every rule you learn will not only redefine how you see the world, but how you see yourself. Because the truth is simple. You do not rise to the level of your potential. You rise to the level of your standards. And Stoicism teaches you to raise them until your life aligns with who you truly are. Identity begins where excuses end. Identity is not something you discover by accident. It is something you build through the decisions you refuse to postpone and the excuses you refuse to repeat. The Stoics taught that a person becomes free the moment they accept responsibility for their inner world. Not because responsibility is easy, but because it is the point where your life stops happening to you and starts happening through you. Every excuse you hold on to becomes a wall around your potential. Every responsibility you accept becomes a doorway into who you could become. Have you ever noticed how quickly the mind searches for explanations that protect comfort rather than truth? I had no choice. I am just like this. People always treat me this way. Life is unfair to me. These thoughts soften discomfort for a moment, but they imprison identity for a lifetime. Epictetus warned that you must not explain away your weakness. You must confront it, not with shame, but with clarity. Not with guilt, but with awareness. Identity begins the moment you look at your patterns with honesty instead of justification. Excuses are seductive because they shift responsibility outward. They make others the authors of your story. But the moment someone else becomes responsible for your peace, your worth, your reactions, or your standards, you lose yourself. Stoicism teaches that your power returns the moment you reclaim responsibility for your own mind. This does not mean blaming yourself for everything that happened to you. It means owning how you respond, how you grow, and how you move forward. There is a profound psychological shift that occurs when you replace the question, "Why is this happening to me?" with, "What is this trying to teach me?" Neuroscience shows that the moment you adopt responsibility-oriented thinking, your brain activates circuits of problem-solving, emotional regulation, and long-term decision-making. This is how identity begins to sharpen. You move away from helplessness and toward agency. You stop living in reaction and begin living with intention. Identity becomes clearer when your choices align with your values rather than your fears. When you decide to wake up earlier, set boundaries, speak truthfully, walk away from what diminishes you, or remain calm in chaos, you are not performing tasks. You are shaping character. You are telling your mind who you are, and your mind listens. Identity is formed by these consistent acts of self-definition. Ask yourself a simple question. Who would I be if I stopped making excuses for the areas of my life that hurt me? The answer is not distant. It is already within you. It has simply been buried under layers of hesitation and self-protection. Stoicism invites you to peel those layers away, not by force, but through clarity, not by pressure, but through awareness. When you remove excuses, you remove the fog that keeps your identity blurred. Your identity begins when you choose responsibility over comfort, clarity over denial, action over avoidance. The moment you stop excusing your limitations, you begin expanding them. The moment you stop justifying crumbs, you stop accepting them. And with every excuse you release, you reclaim a part of yourself that was waiting to return. This is where identity starts. Not in perfection, in ownership. In the quiet but powerful decision to say, "This is my life and I will shape it from within." You become what you tolerate. There comes a point when you must face a truth most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Your life is shaped not only by what you pursue, but by what you permit. Every boundary you fail to set, every disrespect you allow to continue, every habit you ignore becomes part of the architecture of your identity. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of what you are willing to tolerate. And tolerance, more than intention, defines who you become. Have you ever wondered why certain patterns repeat themselves in your life? Why similar people appear with different faces? Why familiar emotional wounds reopen even after time has passed? It is not fate. It is tolerance. The human mind adapts to whatever becomes familiar, even if the familiar is unhealthy. Neuroscience shows that the brain normalizes repeated experiences, wiring them into your identity and self-concept. If you tolerate chaos, chaos becomes home. If you tolerate disrespect, disrespect becomes expected. If you tolerate crumbs, crumbs begin to look like a full meal. Stoicism teaches that the world cannot harm you without your permission. Not because life is gentle, but because your response is always yours to control. You cannot choose what others do, but you can choose what you accept. You can choose what enters your inner circle. You can choose which voices shape your thoughts and which voices you refuse to internalize. Seneca wrote that a person who tolerates insult invites more of it. It is not cruelty, it is cause and effect. What you do not resist becomes your environment, and your environment becomes your identity. Think for a moment about the standards you have unconsciously set. How many times have you said yes when your whole soul wanted to say no? How many times have you stayed silent to keep the peace while abandoning your own? How many times have you allowed someone to treat you in a way that slowly eroded your sense of worth? These moments matter. They accumulate. They shape self-respect or destroy it. They define whether your identity expands or contracts. There is a turning point that arrives when you decide that tolerance is no longer harmless. When you recognize that every time you allow something that hurts you, something inside you shrinks, something quiets, something forgets who you are. But the opposite is also true. The moment you raise your standards, your entire life begins to shift. You attract differently. You choose differently. You speak differently. You walk differently. Because your identity is no longer built from the outside in. It grows from the inside out. Psychology teaches that boundaries are not walls. They are filters. They allow in what builds you and keep out what breaks you. When you stop tolerating what drains your energy, your time, your peace, and your dignity, you send a message to your mind. You tell it, "This is who I am now. This is what I deserve." And the mind listens. It rewires itself to support the identity you are choosing rather than the one you inherited. Stoicism reinforces this with quiet clarity. You cannot control the behavior of others, but you can control the standards you set for yourself. You cannot force respect, but you can refuse environments where disrespect thrives. You cannot rewrite your past, but you can refuse to repeat it. You become what you tolerate. If you accept crumbs, your identity adjusts to survive on crumbs. But if you require a full table, if you require respect, if you require alignment with your values, your identity adjusts upward. This is how transformation begins. Not with ambition, but with refusal. Not with loud declarations, but with disciplined boundaries. You change your life the moment you change what you allow. Your standards predict your future. Your future is not shaped by your dreams. It is shaped by your standards. Dreams inspire you, but standards determine who you are willing to become to reach them. Standards are the invisible rules that guide your behavior, your relationships, your emotional responses, and the opportunities you are capable of sustaining. They are the psychological algorithms that decide what you accept, what you pursue, and what you walk away from. And whether you realize it or not, your standards are writing your future long before it arrives. Have you ever noticed how two people with the same goals can live completely different lives? One keeps growing while the other stays stagnant. One evolves while the other repeats. The difference rarely lies in talent or luck. It lies in the standards each person holds themselves to, especially when no one is watching. High standards do not make life easier. They make identity stronger. They create internal pressure that pushes you toward growth instead of mediocrity. Stoicism teaches that excellence is not an act but a habit. Marcus Aurelius wrote that, "Your life is shaped by the quality of your thoughts." Seneca insisted that a person must live by principles, not impulses. Epictetus taught that freedom comes when the mind refuses to be ruled by external chaos. Underneath all these teachings is a common foundation: standards. The rules you set for yourself become the destiny you walk into. Psychology reinforces this truth. The brain seeks consistency between identity and behavior. If your standards are low, your brain will sabotage anything that rises above them because it does not match your internal self-image. If your standards are high, your brain will reject anything that contradicts them, including relationships, habits, and environments that hold you back. Neuroscience calls this self-regulation. Stoicism calls it self-mastery. Look at your life for a moment. Look at the quality of your relationships, the discipline of your habits, the clarity of your boundaries, the respect you demand from yourself and others. These are reflections of your standards, not your hopes, not your potential, your standards. What you accept today becomes the foundation of who you are tomorrow. If your standards are built on fear, insecurity, or the desire to be accepted, your future will bend toward weakness. If your standards are built on reason, self-respect, and disciplined thought, your future will rise toward strength. Your standards also teach others how to treat you. When you show that your time is valuable, people respect it. When you show that your emotional space matters, people stop crossing lines. When you show that you will not compromise your integrity, people adjust their behavior accordingly or leave. Standards refine your circle. They filter your environment. They protect your identity from erosion. But perhaps the most transformative truth is this: standards are a choice. You can raise them at any moment. You can decide that the old level is no longer acceptable. You can decide that the person you were yesterday is not the person you will be tomorrow. You can decide that crumbs are no longer on the menu. Every moment you elevate your standards, your identity shifts upward. Every standard you reinforce becomes a step toward the future you desire. Your standards are not predictions, they are blueprints. And the quality of the blueprint determines the quality of the life you build. Raise your standards, and your future rises with them. Emotional discipline is your true power. Strength is often mistaken for intensity. People imagine power as loud, forceful, and explosive. But the Stoics understood something far more profound. Real power is quiet. Real power is steady. Real power is the ability to govern your inner world when everything around you tries to pull you out of yourself. Emotional discipline is not suppression. It is self-mastery. It is the art of choosing your response instead of being ruled by your reactions. Have you ever felt trapped by your own emotions as if they were pulling you in a direction you never consciously chose? One moment of anger becomes a decision you regret. One wave of anxiety becomes a day lost to overthinking. One impulse becomes a habit that slowly erodes your self-respect. The Stoics teach that you cannot control what you feel, but you can control what you do with what you feel. That distinction is the birthplace of freedom. Neuroscience supports this principle with precision. Emotions rise from deep automatic parts of the brain, often before you are aware of them. But discipline engages the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for reasoning, reflection, and long-term thinking. The moment you choose to pause, breathe, observe, or question what you are feeling, you interrupt the emotional chain reaction. You reclaim your authority. You stop being a passenger and become the driver again. Stoicism does not demand that you stop feeling. It asks that you stop being owned by your feelings. Marcus Aurelius did not become calm because he felt nothing. He became calm because he created space between stimulus and response. Seneca did not preach detachment to numb pain. He taught detachment to prevent pain from becoming the architect of your identity. Emotional discipline is not about denying your humanity. It is about directing it. Ask yourself this: how many of your past decisions were guided by emotion rather than intention? How many times have you apologized for what you said when you were overwhelmed? How many opportunities have you lost because fear whispered louder than reason? Emotional discipline is the ability to step back from the storm and anchor yourself in clarity. It is the decision to respond from your values rather than your impulses. This discipline grows through practice. It grows when you choose silence over reaction. It grows when you take a breath before answering. It grows when you observe your thoughts instead of obeying them. It grows when you let emotion pass through you without letting it dictate your next move. Over time, your nervous system learns to stabilize. Your mind learns to return to center. Your identity learns that it does not have to collapse under pressure. When you master emotional discipline, you stop accepting crumbs because you stop being controlled by the emotions that once convinced you to settle for them. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop reacting from fear. You stop folding under insecurity. Calm becomes your strength. Clarity becomes your shield. And your identity becomes rooted in integrity rather than impulse. Emotional discipline is not the absence of emotion. It is the elevation of reason. It is the steady voice inside that says, I choose my response, I choose my standard, I choose my identity. Detach from what shrinks you. There comes a moment when you must confront a truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You cannot grow while staying connected to what keeps you small. Every relationship that drains you, every habit that weakens you, every environment that distorts your inner voice, becomes a subtle force that shrinks your identity. Stoicism teaches that your true self cannot expand when you remain entangled with what pulls you backward. Detachment is not abandonment. It is alignment. It is the act of stepping away from what diminishes you so you can step into what develops you. Have you ever felt a quiet sense of suffocation around certain people or habits, as if you were slowly folding yourself into a smaller version of who you are? This is not imagination. It is your inner consciousness telling you that something in your environment is incompatible with your growth. Neuroscience confirms that your surroundings influence your mindset, your emotional regulation, and even your self-worth. When you stay in places that undermine you, your brain adapts downward. Your standards adjust. Your potential contracts. Stoicism understood this long before modern science. Epictetus warned that if you spend time among people who ridicule virtue, you risk becoming like them. Seneca advised choosing companions who elevate your mind rather than corrupt it. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to rise above the influence of those who lived without principles. Detachment in Stoicism is not coldness. It is self-preservation. It is the recognition that identity must be protected from forces that quietly erode it. Ask yourself honestly, what in your life makes you smaller? What conversations leave you doubting yourself? What relationships require you to betray your values to be accepted? What habits leave you feeling drained rather than strengthened? What environments silence the best version of you and amplify the worst? Your identity is shaped by what surrounds you just as much as by what lives within you. Detachment begins with awareness. It is the moment you recognize that staying connected to something harmful is more painful than walking away from it. It is the moment you realize that loyalty to your own growth must outweigh loyalty to your comfort. It is the moment you choose yourself without apology. Psychology teaches that the mind cannot expand in conflict with its environment. If you want to grow stronger, calmer, clearer, and more focused, you need surroundings that reflect that direction. Detachment creates space for alignment. It allows new habits, new people, and new opportunities to enter your life. But more importantly, it allows your identity to breathe. Detaching from what shrinks you is not about becoming rigid or isolated. It is about becoming intentional. It is choosing relationships that respect your boundaries. It is choosing routines that reinforce your values. It is choosing environments that support clarity rather than chaos. It is choosing a life that matches the identity you are building. When you detach from what diminishes you, something remarkable happens. Your energy returns, your focus sharpens, your emotional balance stabilizes, your self-respect strengthens, and your identity begins to grow in the direction of your highest potential. You do not rise by clinging to what keeps you low. You rise by releasing it. Stop negotiating your self-respect. There is a quiet moment in every person's life when they realize the truth they have been avoiding. You do not lose your self-respect all at once. You lose it through small negotiations. One compromise here, one boundary ignored there. One moment when you let someone treat you in a way that contradicts your values. And the most dangerous part is how easy it becomes to justify these losses. You convince yourself that it is not a big deal, that you are being understanding, that lowering your standards will keep the peace. Yet every negotiation chips away at your identity. Have you ever walked away from an interaction and felt something inside you sink, even though you tried to pretend nothing happened? That sinking feeling is the weight of self-betrayal. It is the mind whispering that you allowed something that violated your own principles. Stoicism teaches that integrity is the foundation of identity. Seneca wrote that the person who honors themselves needs no applause, but the person who abandons themselves will always feel incomplete, no matter how much approval they receive. Modern psychology calls this phenomenon cognitive dissonance. When your actions contradict your values, your mind enters conflict. You feel unsettled, restless, and internally divided. You lose clarity. You lose power. You lose trust in yourself. Self-respect is not a feeling. It is a relationship you maintain with your own principles. And every time you negotiate that relationship, you weaken your identity from the inside out. Think for a moment about the situations where you have negotiated yourself away. Moments when you stayed silent instead of speaking truth. Moments when you gave more than was fair. Moments when you tolerated disrespect out of fear of losing someone. Moments when you settled for less because you doubted your worth. These moments matter. They shape the blueprint of your identity. They determine how you show up in the world. Stoicism teaches that virtue is non-negotiable. It is not something you adjust based on the opinions of others. It is something you guard as sacred. Epictetus insisted that you must not let anyone force you to compromise your character. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he must live true to his nature, regardless of external pressures. When you stop negotiating your self-respect, you stop shrinking, you stop bending, you stop apologizing for your standards. You reclaim the strength that was always inside you. Psychologically, refusing to negotiate your self-respect sends a powerful message to your mind. It tells your brain that you are safe within your own boundaries. It stabilizes self-worth. It strengthens confidence. It reduces anxiety. It clears the fog of self-doubt. Your identity begins to align with your values rather than your fears. Self-respect is not arrogance. It is alignment. It is the refusal to betray your principles for approval, validation, or temporary comfort. It is choosing truth over convenience. It is choosing dignity over attachment. It is choosing growth over familiarity. And something transformative happens when you stop negotiating your self-respect. People treat you differently. Opportunities shift. Your emotional world stabilizes. You attract relationships built on mutual respect, not desperation. You begin to trust yourself again. And that trust becomes the foundation of a stronger, clearer, more resilient identity. You teach the world how to treat you by how unwaveringly you treat yourself. Protect your focus. Like it is sacred, your life moves in the direction of your focus. Whatever captures your attention shapes your thoughts. Whatever shapes your thoughts shapes your identity. And whatever shapes your identity shapes your future. This is why the Stoics treated focus not as a casual preference, but as a sacred discipline. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person becomes unstoppable when they limit their attention to what truly matters. The mind is a garden. If you do not guard it, distractions become weeds that consume everything you were meant to grow. Have you ever noticed how easily your energy scatters? One notification fractures your concentration. One comparison on social media drains your confidence. One emotionally charged message pulls you out of your center. The world is loud, fast, and constantly demanding your attention. But identity cannot be built in noise. Identity requires depth. Focus is the doorway to that depth. Neuroscience shows that focus is not just mental effort. It is the alignment of your brain's executive functions. When you protect your attention, your nervous system stabilizes. Your emotional regulation improves. Your decision-making sharpens. You become less reactive, more intentional, and far more capable of shaping your life. But when your focus is scattered, your identity fractures with it. You become a mirror of whatever distractions surround you. Think for a moment about the cost of broken focus. How many goals have remained unfinished because your attention was divided? How many deep insights slipped away because you were pulled toward superficial noise? How many relationships suffered because emotional clutter drowned out presence? Focus is not optional. It is identity maintenance. Stoicism teaches that the mind must be trained to return to what matters. Epictetus warned that if you do not decide what is important, everything will feel urgent. Seneca insisted on periods of quiet reflection because he understood that clarity cannot grow in constant stimulation. These teachings are not ancient relics. They are psychological truths confirmed by modern science. Your mind becomes what it repeatedly focuses on. Your identity takes the shape of your attention. Protecting your focus begins with recognizing that not everything deserves access to your mind. You do not owe your attention to every message, every demand, every emotion, or every person who wants a piece of you. Your attention is the currency of your life, and spending it on what weakens you is a form of self-neglect. To protect your focus, you must cultivate boundaries around your mental space. You choose silence when the world grows loud. You choose depth over distraction. You choose intentional action over impulsive reaction. You choose environments that strengthen your clarity. You choose people who support your growth. You choose habits that sharpen your identity instead of scattering it. When you treat your focus as sacred, something profound happens. Your mind stops chasing everything and starts creating something. Your inner world becomes quieter. Your priorities become clearer. Your standards rise. And your identity becomes more grounded, resilient, and powerful. Focus is not a skill you practice once. It is a discipline you guard daily, because your life cannot transform if your attention remains fragmented. Protect your focus and you protect the person you are becoming. Never beg for what you can build. There is a moment in every person's life when they realize the painful truth. Begging for what you want weakens you, but building what you want strengthens you. Stoicism teaches that your power is never found in pleading for external validation, opportunity, or recognition. Your power is found in cultivating inner authority. The more you rely on others to give you direction, worth, or opportunity, the more fragile your identity becomes. But the moment you decide to build instead of beg, you shift from dependency to autonomy. And autonomy is the birthplace of identity. Have you ever caught yourself waiting for someone to choose you, approve you, recognize you, or open a door for you? In those moments, you hand over the keys to your own future. You give away control of your emotional world. You silence your inner strength in exchange for external permission. But permission is a prison when it becomes a requirement for progress. Stoicism teaches that the person who relies on external validation will forever be shaped by forces outside their control. Modern psychology reinforces this insight. When your self-worth depends on others, your nervous system becomes reactive. You feel anxious when approval is uncertain. You feel discouraged when recognition is delayed. You feel inferior when validation is given to someone else. This cycle erodes your confidence and keeps you emotionally dependent. But when you build rather than beg, your brain shifts into agency. You activate circuits of resilience, discipline, and self-direction. You begin to move from strength, not scarcity. Consider how often people beg for things they could build. Instead of developing confidence, they beg for reassurance. Instead of cultivating skills, they beg for opportunities. Instead of strengthening boundaries, they beg for respect. Instead of choosing their path, they beg for guidance. Begging is not humility. Begging is the abandonment of personal power. Building, on the other hand, is the conscious act of shaping your own identity. Stoicism teaches that everything you need to live a meaningful life is already within you. Epictetus insisted that external things are not under your control, but your thoughts, actions, and discipline always are. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that the world cannot withhold what you can generate from within. Napoleon Hill echoed this truth in a modern context. Desire becomes reality through disciplined action, not external approval. Ask yourself honestly, how many of your frustrations come from waiting instead of creating? How many moments of weakness were born from expecting someone else to do what you could have done yourself? How many times have you held yourself back because you feared stepping into responsibility? Each moment you choose to build rather than beg strengthens your identity. You stop asking others to set your value. You define it yourself. When you build, you become someone you can trust. You cultivate skills. You fortify discipline. You develop resilience. You create opportunities that once felt out of reach. Your identity becomes grounded in capability rather than longing. And you stop accepting crumbs because you no longer see yourself as someone who needs to settle for less than you can create. Never beg for what you can build. Build your confidence. Build your discipline. Build your standards. Build your identity. When you build, you rise. And when you rise, you no longer wait for doors to open. You become the one who creates them. Your environment must match your identity. Identity cannot grow in soil that contradicts it. No matter how strong your intentions are, no matter how powerful your self-discipline becomes, you cannot develop into your highest self while living in an environment that pulls you back into your lowest patterns. Your surroundings shape your behavior. Your behavior shapes your habits. Your habits shape your identity. And your identity shapes your future. This is why Stoicism teaches that you must choose your environment as carefully as you choose your values. Have you ever noticed how different you feel in different places or around different people? How some environments make you sharper, calmer, more focused, more ambitious, while others make you smaller, more reactive, more distracted, or more insecure. This is not coincidence. Neuroscience reveals that the brain mirrors the emotional energy of the environment. If you live in chaos, your mind becomes chaotic. If you live among negativity, your thoughts darken. If you live surrounded by mediocrity, your standards lower without you realizing it. Stoicism understood this long before science gave it language. Seneca warned that even the strongest character can be corrupted by the wrong company. Epictetus insisted that you must avoid people who weaken your resolve. Marcus Aurelius surrounded himself with individuals who embodied discipline, humility, and wisdom, because he knew identity is shaped by what it absorbs. You cannot build a strong identity while living in a weak environment. Ask yourself honestly, does your environment reflect the person you are becoming or the person you used to be? Look at your habits, your routines, your relationships, your physical space. Do they support clarity, discipline, and self-respect? Or do they reinforce distraction, emotional instability, and a sense of stagnation? Your environment is a daily message to your mind. It tells you what is normal. It tells you what is acceptable. It tells you what to expect from yourself. If your environment contradicts your identity, one of the two must change. Either the environment will pull your identity downward, or your identity will demand a new environment. Growth becomes nearly impossible when your surroundings constantly trigger old patterns. Imagine trying to heal in a place that keeps reopening the wound. Imagine trying to focus in a space designed for distraction. Imagine trying to rise while being surrounded by people who feel threatened by your ascent. Your environment must evolve for your identity to evolve. Psychology teaches that the mind adapts to the atmosphere it exists in. If you want clarity, create space for it. If you want discipline, build a structure that supports it. If you want peace, remove the sources of chaos. If you want strength, place yourself where strength is practiced and respected. The external world is not separate from the internal world. They reflect each other. Changing your environment is not an act of rejection. It is an act of alignment. It is choosing proximity to what elevates you. It is distancing yourself from what drains you. It is giving your identity a chance to grow without resistance. When your environment matches your identity, discipline becomes easier, clarity comes faster, and self-respect becomes natural. Your mind stops fighting its surroundings and starts expanding within them. Your environment should be a mirror of your highest standards, not your lowest compromises. Build a space that reflects who you are becoming, and your identity will rise to meet it. Choose pain that makes you grow, not pain that makes you shrink. Pain is unavoidable, but the kind of pain you choose determines the kind of life you build. There is pain that strengthens you, and there is pain that diminishes you. One is the pain of discipline, clarity, and self-respect. The other is the pain of self-betrayal, chaos, and settling for less. Stoicism teaches that while you cannot escape discomfort, you can choose the discomfort that shapes you rather than the one that breaks you. Your identity is forged by this choice more than any other. Have you ever stayed in a situation that hurt you, not because you wanted to, but because leaving felt even harder? This is the pain that shrinks you. It is the weight of a stagnant relationship, the exhaustion of carrying responsibilities that are not yours, the frustration of living below your potential. Shrinking pain drains your energy, erodes your confidence, and slowly convinces you that you deserve the very struggle that is diminishing you. This type of pain keeps you small. Growth pain is different. It is the tension of stepping into the unknown. It is the challenge of holding boundaries. It is the discomfort of breaking old patterns and building new habits. It is the moment you say no to what weakens you and yes to what strengthens you. This pain stretches you rather than suffocates you. It builds resilience rather than resentment. It elevates your identity instead of diminishing it. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics understood intuitively. Your brain grows through adaptive stress. When you challenge yourself, when you practice discipline, when you confront uncomfortable truths, your neural pathways strengthen. But when you endure chronic emotional pain that serves no purpose, your nervous system becomes overwhelmed. Your confidence collapses. Your decision-making deteriorates. Your sense of identity becomes fragile. The type of pain you choose determines the shape of your mind. Seneca said that difficult roads strengthen courage. Epictetus insisted that hardship reveals character more than it creates it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the obstacle becomes the way only when the obstacle is chosen for growth, not when suffering is accepted passively. Stoicism never glorified pointless suffering. It taught the difference between meaningful struggle and destructive endurance. Ask yourself honestly, which pain has ruled your life? The pain that pushes you to evolve or the pain that keeps you stuck? Think of the moments where you endured discomfort just to avoid change. Think of the situations you tolerated because you feared setting boundaries. Think of the habits you maintained because breaking them required temporary friction. Shrinking pain feels familiar, which is why so many people mistake it for stability. But it is not stability. It is slow erosion. Growth pain is temporary and purposeful. It asks you to rise above impulse, to remain committed to your values, to expand your identity through deliberate action. It sharpens your discipline. It deepens your clarity. It strengthens your sense of self. And every time you choose growth pain over shrinking pain, you send a powerful message to your mind. You tell it that you are not afraid of becoming who you were meant to be. Choosing the right kind of pain is choosing the right kind of identity. It is refusing to suffer in ways that weaken you and embracing struggle in ways that build you. The person who chooses growth pain becomes unshakable. The person who chooses shrinking pain becomes lost. Your life will always contain discomfort. The question is whether that discomfort will shrink your identity or shape it. Build a self you would be proud to follow. There is a powerful question that most people never ask themselves. If you were not you, would you follow the person you are becoming? Would you trust them? Would you respect their discipline, admire their choices, and feel inspired by their presence? Or would you feel disappointed, confused, or unsure of their direction? Identity is not just who you are, it is who you are becoming. And the Stoics teach that the highest goal of self-development is to build a self you would be proud to follow. Have you ever felt the tension between the person you want to be and the person you repeatedly choose to be? That tension is not failure. It is awareness. It is the mind awakening to its own potential. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. In other words, your identity is shaped by your repeated choices. Each action is a vote for the person you are building. Each habit is a brick in the structure of your character. Modern psychology reinforces this through the concept of identity-based behavior. Your mind seeks consistency between who you believe you are and how you act. When your actions contradict your self-image, you experience internal conflict. But when your actions align with your highest values, you experience internal harmony. Confidence grows. Clarity strengthens. Self-respect becomes natural. You begin to trust yourself. And a person who trusts themselves becomes unstoppable. Think of someone you deeply admire. What qualities do they embody? Discipline, integrity, courage, compassion, focus. Stoicism teaches that these virtues are not gifts. They are practices. They are cultivated through intention and repetition. You do not become admirable by wishing for it. You become admirable by acting in ways that align with admiration. When you make choices that reflect your highest principles, you begin to build a self that commands your own respect. Ask yourself honestly, are you building a version of yourself that you would look up to? Or a version you quietly avoid confronting? Do your habits reflect strength or hesitation? Do your boundaries reflect self-respect or fear? Do your decisions reflect clarity or chaos? These questions are not meant to condemn you. They are meant to awaken you. Because the truth is liberating. You are never stuck with the person you have been. You can rebuild your identity at any moment by choosing actions that reflect who you want to become. Stoicism emphasizes the power of daily practice. Epictetus taught that excellence is achieved not in grand gestures but in small, consistent decisions. Seneca insisted that character is forged in the moments no one sees. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every morning to live in accordance with virtue, regardless of how he felt. These teachings form a blueprint for modern identity building. They show that transformation is not an event. It is a habit. Building a self you would follow does not require perfection. It requires alignment. It requires that your actions reflect your values more often than they reflect your impulses. It requires the courage to confront your weaknesses without shame and strengthen your strengths without arrogance. It requires consistency, honesty, and intentional effort. And something profound happens when you commit to this path. Your identity begins to stabilize. Your confidence grows quietly. Your emotional world becomes calmer. People respond to you differently, not because you are pretending to be strong, but because you are becoming strong. You become someone you trust, someone you admire, someone you can rely on. Build a self you would be proud to follow, and your life will begin to follow you. The hidden Stoic rule: stop asking for permission to be yourself. There is a quiet but powerful way many people sabotage their identity. They wait. They wait for approval, for validation, for reassurance, for someone to confirm that their decisions are acceptable, their dreams are reasonable, their boundaries are justified. This habit slowly erodes confidence and replaces inner authority with external dependence. Stoicism teaches that the moment you stop asking for permission to be yourself is the moment your identity finally begins to take shape. Have you ever felt afraid to make a choice simply because you worried what others would think? Have you held back from expressing your ideas, your standards, or your feelings because you feared being judged or misunderstood? This hesitation is not weakness. It is conditioning. From childhood, many people learn to seek permission before acting. But what begins as social adaptation becomes emotional imprisonment. You lose sight of your own voice. Stoicism cuts through this with blunt clarity. Epictetus said that freedom begins the moment you stop concerning yourself with what lies beyond your control. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he must live according to his nature, not according to the opinions of others. Seneca taught that no one can give you permission to be who you already are. The identity you are searching for emerges when you stop waiting for others to authorize it. Modern psychology supports this truth. When your behavior is shaped by external approval, your nervous system becomes unstable. You develop chronic self-doubt. You minimize your strengths. You silence your needs. You betray your boundaries. And over time, you forget what you actually want. But when you stop seeking permission, your brain shifts into autonomy. You activate inner leadership. You begin to trust your judgment. Your identity strengthens because it is rooted in self-direction rather than fear. Ask yourself honestly, how many decisions in your life were made through the lens of someone else's expectations? How many times did you lower your standards to avoid conflict? How many opportunities did you reject because insecurity whispered that you were not ready? Every time you ask for permission to be yourself, you shrink. Every time you wait for validation, you delay your growth. Every time you silence your truth, your identity becomes blurred. Stopping this pattern does not mean becoming reckless. It means becoming authentic. It means allowing your actions to align with your values, not someone else's comfort. It means understanding that identity is not discovered in the eyes of others, but built in the depths of your own clarity. When you stop asking for permission, something profound happens. You reclaim your power to choose. You reclaim your power to act. You reclaim your power to define your own worth. You no longer need approval to speak truthfully. You no longer need validation to set boundaries. You no longer need reassurance to pursue something meaningful. Your identity becomes grounded in autonomy, and autonomy is the cornerstone of self-respect. This hidden Stoic rule carries a simple message. Your life does not require permission slips. Your growth does not require applause. Your purpose does not require consensus. The identity you are building begins to rise when you decide that who you truly are is enough. Stop asking for permission to be yourself. The moment you do, you will finally meet the person you are meant to become. Walk away from crumbs. Walk toward your identity. There comes a moment when everything becomes clear. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you finally recognize the quiet truth that has been waiting for you beneath every struggle, every disappointment, every moment of self-negotiation. The life you accept is the life you live, and the identity you claim is the identity you become. Walking away from crumbs is not about arrogance or pride. It is about awakening. It is about realizing that settling for less is a slow form of self-abandonment, while demanding more from yourself is an act of inner liberation. Have you ever felt the pull between who you are and who you could be? That tension is not confusion. It is direction. It is your inner consciousness pointing you toward the person you were meant to become. Stoicism teaches that identity is not found. It is shaped. It is carved through choices, disciplined through habits, and strengthened through boundaries. Every time you walk away from what diminishes you, you tell your mind, I deserve a life that reflects my standards. And the mind listens. It rewires. It grows. It adapts to the level you rise to. Your future begins the moment you stop settling. The moment you stop tolerating environments that weaken you. The moment you stop negotiating your self-respect. The moment you stop waiting for permission to be yourself. The moment you stop begging for what you can build. These choices form the architecture of your identity. They transform your inner world long before they change your outer world. But eventually the outer world aligns too. Because a person who knows their worth no longer fears losing what was never meant to stay. Psychology teaches that self-identity stabilizes when your actions consistently align with your values. Neuroscience teaches that confidence grows when your choices reinforce inner authority. Stoicism teaches that virtue is lived, not proclaimed. All three lead to the same truth. You rise through action. You rise through awareness. You rise through refusal. And the greatest refusal of all is the refusal to live a life that shrinks the person you are capable of becoming. Picture yourself standing at the edge of two paths. One path is familiar. It is lined with old habits, old fears, old compromises, old versions of yourself that once felt safe. But safety is not the same as growth. The other path is uncertain. It demands discipline. It demands courage. It demands internal clarity. But this second path holds your future identity. It is the road where you stop accepting crumbs and start shaping a life worthy of your potential. Walking away is not abandonment. It is alignment. It is choosing discomfort over dishonor. It is choosing growth over familiarity. It is choosing the self you are becoming rather than the self you outgrew. And with every step you take, your identity shifts. It becomes clearer, stronger, brighter, more grounded in truth and less dependent on noise. No one can walk this path for you. No one can decide your standards. No one can choose your boundaries, your discipline, your inner philosophy. But once you choose them for yourself, everything changes. You stop craving approval because you approve of your direction. You stop fearing rejection because you refuse to reject your own worth. You stop chasing crumbs because you finally understand the value of a full table you build with your own hands. This is the moment where identity takes form, not in words, but in choices, not in emotion, but in commitment, not in hope, but in action. Walk away from crumbs. Walk toward your identity, because the self you are becoming is waiting on the other side of the standards you choose today.